Hello, you're watching Fact of the Matter. I'm Navya Singh. In this show, we talk about issues that remain untold and neglected. These are issues that matter to you and me. Today, we will talk about fuel price hike, one issue that is bothering everyone in the country, especially the common man. Lately, a lot of you have written to us asking why the government is constantly increasing fuel prices. As rising fuel prices continue to burn a hole in the pocket of the common man, we wish to explore and understand this topic from all possible angles. Fuel prices were hiked for 14th time this month on 27th of May. Now, if we go by the recent hike as of 27th of May, people in Delhi need to pay 93.68 rupees per litre for petrol and 84.6 rupees per litre for diesel. A litre of petrol in Mumbai now comes for 99.9 rupees and diesel is priced at 91.8 rupees per litre. In most of the big cities, petrol is well above the 90 rupees per litre mark and diesel has either surpassed the 90 rupees mark or is inching towards it. In several states, people are paying 100 rupees per litre for petrol like Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. Now, it does hurt when you see a 3-digit number for 1 litre of petrol. It is crucial to understand that fuel prices affect every commodity you buy, big or small. Everything that is a part of your household comes in diesel-driven trucks. We know that people in India are paying a heavy price for fuel every day. Let's take a look at what our neighbors are paying for every litre of petrol. On your screen is a list of countries, our neighbors, and what they are paying for petrol and diesel in their respective countries. Clearly, there is a stark difference between the fuel price in India and its neighboring countries. Because of this drastic difference, many people have been smuggling petrol from Nepal to India. Why? Because you can get it at a lesser price in Nepal. There were reports which suggested that people were going to Nepal on bikes and bicycles and coming back with cans filled with fuel. Now, before we question why are we paying so much for fuel in India, let me quickly take you through a quick breakup of the price that you are paying for fuel in India. Now, let's first talk about the price that you're paying for petrol in the national capital. Again, this data is as of 16th of May 2021. The numbers have changed as of now. Now, as you can see, the price to dealers, excluding excise duty and VAT, now this is the base price for petrol, is about 34 rupees per litre. Then comes the excise duty, which is imposed by the central government, about 32.9 rupees per litre, nearly 33 rupees per litre. Then comes the dealer's commission, which is about 3.7 rupees per litre. And then you add the VAT, which is imposed by different states' governments. And again, the VAT is different for every state. Now, when you add all of these numbers, you get 92.64 rupees. This is the price that you're paying for petrol in the national capital. Now, let's talk about what you're paying for diesel in the national capital. The base price is about 36.6 rupees. Then comes the excise duty, about 31.8 rupees. The dealer's commission, about 3 rupees. And VAT, which is about 12 rupees. Now, the total is about 83.28 rupees. This is the price that you're paying for diesel in the national capital. As you can see, there is a stark difference between the base price of petrol and diesel and the price that you are paying for both the fuels. The reason is the government taxes. Union Petroleum Minister Dharmendra Pradhan said that there are two main reasons behind the fuel price rise in the country. The international market has reduced fuel production and manufacturing countries are producing less fuel to gain more profit. This in turn is making the consumer countries suffer, and India, as we know, is a consumer country. Complicated? Let's make it easy for you. Petrol and diesel are products of crude oil. India buys about 83% of our crude oil requirement from other countries. So yes, the price of fuel that you are paying in India is directly linked to the price of crude oil.
India's fuel prices have been rising consistently despite a drop in the international crude prices. There are two reasons for this that we can consider. The first has to do with what we call as the oil account deficit or the oil pool deficit. Now, the oil pool deficit in its most simple form is basically a cross subsidy scheme, which is basically a way to compensate oil companies for subsidies that are offered on kerosene and LPG. India no longer offers subsidies on petroleum and diesel. However, subsidies are continued to be offered on kerosene and LPG because they are usually consumed more by the economically weaker sections of society. As a result of this, they are using taxes and duties collected on crude imports as a way to cross-subsidize the lower prices that are being maintained for kerosene and for LPG. Keeping this in mind, it is necessary for the government to look for new ways of raising revenue in order to meet the demands of an increased expenditure.
But the important question here is the price that you are paying totally dependent on global prices? Well, no. Even when international crude oil prices fell in 2020 due to a lower demand, Indians kept paying a higher price for petrol and diesel due to various taxes levied. At the moment, Indians pay one of the highest taxes on fuel in the world. This brings us to two more factors that are equally significant and important to decide the price that you pay for petrol and diesel. The key word here is taxes. Excise duty that is levied by the central government and VAT imposed by the states, which is again different from state to state. Now, when the COVID crisis broke out in the country, the government increased taxes. In simple words, the benefit that should have come to you, the people, especially when global crude prices were also down, went to the government. Why is the government constantly increasing fuel prices? The government says that it needs the money. It needs money to fight the health crisis and reduce its impact on the economy. Also, because people will need petrol and diesel, and it's an easy way for the government to get money directly from the petrol pump to the government coffers. Now, there are only two ways that any government can easily fill their coffers without any tax evasion: alcohol and fuel prices. Now, alcohol is not really helpful right now because pubs and bars are shut, so the government has decided to earn money through rising fuel prices. The central government's tax collections on petrol and diesel have jumped more than 300% in the last 6 years as excise duty on the two fuels was hiked. PM Modi in 2018 had vowed to reduce the dependency on oil imports by 10% in the coming 7 years. But are we anywhere close to the target? Sadly, no. In fact, our dependency has increased on oil imports from 77% in 2014 to nearly 84% now. The high rate of fuel prices also affects the automotive sector, which is a large source of employment in the country. Why? Because vehicle sales may also go down. You will think twice before buying a vehicle if you have to pay Rs 100 per litre for petrol. A dip in demand for vehicles will impact the automotive industry and MSMEs that supply goods to that particular sector. Lower demand will then lead to massive job loss in the auto sectors. If you do not own a personal vehicle, you will eventually be affected as you will then have to pay more for using public transport. The public transportation sector is already reeling under a hike in rates in view of increasing operational costs. Now, another angle to this story is how the government is trying to boost the sales of electrical vehicles. Let's see what the experts have to say on this.
The other reason that can also be considered is India's own target for electric vehicles. As per the Niti Aayog report, by 2030, India has set aside a fairly large target in terms of electric vehicles, which is about 70% of all public cars and transportation and 30% of your private cars. Now, an increase in fuel prices may be the necessary push factor towards people adopting cleaner energy sources, including electric vehicles. This could be an alternative theory that's worth considering.
Now that we understand the problem, it is also important to see if there are any alternatives to ensure that the common man does not suffer.
Are there any other ways in which the government can increase its sources of revenue? Yes, there is always the chance of widening the tax base in terms of increasing income tax collection. But we have to keep in mind that given our current state of economy, where incomes have come down, where earnings have reduced, it seems a very, very difficult time for the government to raise its revenue from any of the usual sources that are there. While an increased fuel price does have a filtering down effect or a trickle down effect in terms of inflation, in terms of transportation costs, which indirectly then affects prices of pretty much every single commodity. The fact of the matter is, I suppose from the government's point of view, those having to pay the extra price because of having increased duty on crude oil, which is largely your petrol and diesel, the bulk of that is being paid by a section of the population which can afford to pay it, as opposed to cutting subsidy for LPG and for kerosene, which would be the more practical thing to do possibly, but clearly not feasible.
Undoubtedly, these fuel prices affect people from all walks of life. Many people say that they will cut down on their daily expenses to put fuel in their bikes or cars. Since it could take a while before India becomes Atmanirbhar or self-reliant and reduces oil imports, the government urgently needs to find a solution to the fuel price crisis. In a recent interview, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman had said that to save people from the suffering, states and the centre will have to sit down and together come up with a solution. However, the government and the states have still not decided on a date as to when they should discuss this and reduce the burden on people. If you like this explainer video, do share it with others who might want to know more about this topic. We will keep coming up with more interesting videos and try to break down issues that require explanation. Watch Fact of the Matter every Friday with me, Navya Singh, on The Logical Indian. Till then, stay safe, stay logical.